Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another edition of our KTBS Political Podcast. The title is The App. The app in this case, I always have to say this, has nothing to do with the internet, nothing to do with computers. In this case, the app stands for Arklatex People and Politics. We like to speak to just about anybody along the political spectrum. Today we have a couple of special guests, the United States Secretary of Education, Linda McMahon, and Louisiana Superintendent of Education Cade Brumley. The Secretary was in Baton Rouge just recently. She's starting a tour across all 50 states. It's a Returning Education to the States tour. As you know, President Donald Trump has decided to do away with the Department of Education. She was tasked to be the newest secretary, basically firing herself. That's what it amounts to. But she started her tour in Louisiana because Louisiana students have shown such great progress basically across all phases of education. Their test scores are up, their grades are up. They've made a dramatic move from rankings, national rankings, from about 50th all the way up to about 32nd. So that's why the Secretary was in Louisiana starting her tour in Baton Rouge. We had a chance to visit with her one-on-one. We were one of only 2 television stations in the state that were allowed to visit with the Secretary on an individual basis, so we feel pretty good about that. We have a conversation with her and Cade Brumley. The whole total is about 25 minutes or so, and we're breaking it into 2 parts, and we have a halftime presentation as well here, so to speak. So let's go ahead with part 1 of our conversation with Secretary of Education Linda McMahon and Louisiana Superintendent of Education Cade Brumley. All right, we're with Secretary of Education Linda McMahon. First of all, thanks for being in Louisiana.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So explain to us why you chose Louisiana to begin your 50 states tour.
Well, I chose Louisiana because it is just doing some incredible things with Superintendent Brumley, who's just done remarkable things in education here. They've returned a lot to classical education, which we're seeing in this particular school here today. They've had scores that are just, tremendous in coming from almost next to last in the country to being now at about 32, which is just incredible progress. And the progress they made after COVID in their reading scores was the highest in the country. So why not start here where they've had great success and learn and listen to what is being successful?
What are some of the things you're learning today? We followed you in first school as you walked through, and there was some pretty good teaching going on there.
There was, in different kinds of teaching. I'm really interested in, I felt like I was back in first grade a little bit, and when we were in the first and second classrooms, because they actually were teaching phonics. And that is how I learned to read. I think generations after me learned to read that way, and then we kind of lost our way. And we saw what happened. Reading scores plummeted. Students were not learning how to read. Today, according to the most recent NAEP scores, only about 30% of 8th graders can read proficiently. That means 70% can't. And that's just, it's deplorable. That's what's happened. We have failed our students in our education, and so now we're trying to come back. So I'm touring to see what different schools are doing in different states, because one size does not fit all, but obviously what is being taught here in Louisiana is working.
We think so too, and phonics is the way I learned to read too. It works. It really does work. By the way, I saw you write your name on the board. We had you write your name. Like it was, you're the teacher in the first day of school, and you use cursive. That's not being taught anymore.
No, my grandchildren, I have some in college and some in high school, they don't know how to read or write cursive. And so I'm happy to hear from Dr. Brumley that he has instructed in Louisiana that it's back to cursive.
Yeah, I'm going to turn over here for just a second, if you don't mind.
Oh, please.
Okay. Cade, talk to me about what the Secretary was just mentioning there, going back to teaching cursive.
Yeah, so in Louisiana, we passed legislation a few years back where elementary teachers have to teach children how to read and write in cursive. I think it's really important when you put it in the context of historical documents. Many of the historical documents say the Declaration of Independence, written in cursive. And so if students can't read that, then they may not have a full appreciation of those documents. And so that's one of the changes that we've made.
Talk to me about some of the other changes and the great leaps that you've made in your test scores.
Well, Louisiana is the most rapidly improving state in the country for educational outcomes, and we're honored to have Secretary McMahon here with us today. She's been a great partner for us. I think with her work and what she's doing alongside the president to return education to the states, it puts us in a really nice position to provide additional emphasis to teachers and local school systems so that they can make decisions in the best interest of their kids.
Okay, I'm going to turn back over here. And the title of your tour is Returning Education to the States. Explain what you mean by that.
Well, the president's directive to me when he asked me to be the Secretary of Education was to shut down the Department of Education, to fire myself, have me be the last Secretary of Education, because he wanted to take the bureaucracy out of education and return it to the states. He believes that the best education for every child is the one closest to that child, and clearly that's in the states. And so I'm on this tour, as I mentioned, to see what are best practices in states around the country so that we can share those best practices with all states, help provide toolkits for others to see that this is what works, this is what hasn't worked, and hopefully that's going to be a good thing for our nation.
I mean that seems like a great idea. And still, even as you say, you're kind of charged with dismantling your own department, which feels a little weird. You'll still be able to aid the states.
Well, I can tell you what I'm hoping to do. It's literally shutting down the Department of Education, but making education the best it has ever been by putting it in the hands of the local governors and superintendents, and most importantly, parents, because parents really do need to be engaged and help make choices for their children. And the president's focus is really on that, the power of parents and also the freedom of choice. He doesn't believe that any child should be trapped in a failing school. And I think you've seen with current legislation, we are moving more and more in that direction.
All right, let me turn back over here to Dr. Brumley. Cade, your thoughts on, I guess, taking apart the federal Department of Education and returning it more to the states?
Yeah, so I've been a fan of dismantling the Department of Education for some time. I think it's the right thing to do. I think that you push the funds down to the governors, the state boards of education, state departments of education, working with local communities, moms and dads, teachers, to make the best decisions. And so this administration with President Trump and Secretary McMahon have been really committed to supporting us in that way, to raising academic excellence expectations, but at the same time recognizing that education is a states' rights issue. And so we're ready to take that on, and we're ready to take the momentum that we already have and accelerate that forward.
Obviously they've taken well to it, but when you came in and took over as a superintendent, you started putting reforms in there. How was that received by the classroom teachers?
Look, our classroom teachers are the reason that we are seeing the success that we're seeing. It's a testament to their work, and they've been right there alongside of us, whether it's going back to the foundations of math, whether it's the science of reading. They've been there. They're the ones doing the hard work of implementing. That's why our Let Teachers Teach work is so important. Removing excessive paperwork, removing excessive training, making sure that classrooms are free from student distractions. And so we're really focused on that so that teachers can teach and kids can learn.
I think that was I'm married to a teacher. So one of the things he just said was really struck home. My wife is inundated and buried with paperwork that has nothing to do with teaching the kids. Is that something you hope that can be removed?
Absolutely. One stat that we have that I thought was incredibly astounding was that almost 50 cents of every dollar is spent by teachers in compliance with regulations. Let's get that money into the classrooms. Let's raise teachers' pay. Let's get the money to the kids. We don't need the bureaucracy in Washington taking that much of the money.
Yeah, well, I mean, why is there so much of that bureaucracy? It's kind of a CYA kind of a thing?
Well, I think it's called mission creep. Probably the Department of Education was stood up with the best of intentions, like a lot of things are. However, all of a sudden you need more people to do this, more people to do that, more people to do the other, and suddenly you have a bureaucracy that's untenable and takes away the focus of what education should be.
Yeah. Kay, do you think getting rid of some of that deregulation and paperwork, that's what helped your test scores get better?
Well, I think it will certainly help us move forward because teachers will be free from that and those burdens, and they can spend more time looking at student performance and instructing children. which is what's really important. You know, we passed policies this year called our one and done model. Many of the teachers' trainings that they were having to do annually, year after year after year. It made no sense. So we've moved to a model in many ways where teachers get the training one time and they're done. I believe our teachers are smart, they're competent, they get their training, and they can move on. They don't have to have it year over year over year.
All right, that is the first half of our conversation with Secretary of Education Linda McMahon and State Superintendent of Education Cade Brumley. Pretty interesting conversation so far, I think you'd agree. Of course, it was a nice honor for Louisiana to be first on the Secretary's tour, but there's always going to be some naysayers. Let's take a look at some of this video. There were some protesters outside the first school in Baton Rouge. Not many, maybe a dozen, maybe 15. I'm not really sure. They were pretty orderly. They, as you can see, holding up some signs referencing MAGA, and basically they were saying that Linda McMahon was unqualified to be the Secretary of Education. But as we've established, her main goal is to come in and dismantle the Department of Education. So protesters there didn't. You know, they weren't loud, they weren't noisy, they weren't chanting, they weren't singing. They were just basically holding up some signs. Several of them were holding up signs. Of course, she's married to Vince McMahon, who's the former head of WWE wrestling, and they were holding up some signs with her wrestling name, the name she used on some of the wrestling telecasts. So anyway, that's the way it looked with the protesters out there in Baton Rouge. Just a handful, as I said, and maybe 12 or 15 protesters or so. So, that was them. We had the first half of our conversation. Now let's go to part two of our conversation with Secretary of Education Linda McMahon and State Superintendent of Education Cade Brumley. How much interaction do you have with President Trump? And I mean, what type of reports do you bring back to him?
I bring back reports as needed with the president, or when he desires to have an update on something. It's not a weekly or even a bi-weekly meeting with him. It's really pretty much the projects that he's working on or the projects that I'm working on. My next meeting with him will be to go through what we hope is the wind down timing and period for the Department of Education. So I'm looking very forward to that. He does, however, have more cabinet meetings than most presidents have in a long time. He's already had more than Biden had in the 4 years that he was there. And the cabinet meetings are very interactive. He wants conversation. He wants us to interact with each other. And the great part about this cabinet is that we really do work with each other and talk with each other and see what we're doing and help. We collaborate with each other, and that's really very important.
How tough was the approval process? I mean, those are always a nerve-wracking thing to go through.
Well, yes, they are nerve-wracking to go through, and I think we have seen that it's a slow process right now of trying to get people confirmed and get them through. But I must say that I had very, very good coaching to get through. We did what were called murder boards, and you actually sit through, what will likely be your Senate confirmation hearing. And so, you're prepared.
Well, that's good. You got to be prepared. What's next in the state of Louisiana with the great leap you've already made? How do you build on that?
Well, we're really focused on looking at math right now. With all of the gains in literacy, math is jealous. And so we have to spend some time with math there. Also expanding school choice options and continuing along the Let Teachers Teach pathway. We think we'll continue to see great results in Louisiana because we have a historic situation where, as a native of Louisiana, we've been taught that we have to be 49th or 50th in education. Yeah. And I think that we've proven that doesn't have to be the case. In fact, it's not the case.
So the people in the classrooms, again, are taking well to all of these reforms?
Yeah, I mean, I consistently brag on the teachers across the state. We're not where we are in improvements without the teachers rethinking their practice. Okay. And we're not where we are without removing some of the barriers. And there are still barriers and paperwork and trainings that have to be removed, and we're going to keep working towards that. But I think that teachers in the state of Louisiana should feel like there's an administration in Baton Rouge, from the governor to the legislature to the state board to my office, that wants to create the conditions where they can do their jobs free from distraction.
All right. Secretary McMahon, what is tougher? Is it working through politics in Washington, D.C., or your old job?
Well, I think working through the politics in Washington, D.C. in my old job, I could I could sometimes control outcomes.
Yeah, I know you could.
So now we have to work on convincing people for outcomes, which is fine. That's why we have a great representative government that we have.
And what's been the reaction to people? I mean, I've heard a lot of it when they talk about dismantling the Department of Education. What's been the reception to that you found?
I found it to be mixed, but on the whole, very supportive of dismantling the Department of Education. And so let's take it and not say dismantling the Department of Education, but rather returning education to the states.
Sorry.
No, that's fine. But that's what I really want to key in on. It's returning education to where it needs to be, where it's closest to the child, where parents have input into the curriculum with their children. In fact, at the school where we were previously, I was asking one of the members, I said, you spoke about parental engagement. I said, how do you do that? And she said, we have a schedule. We meet with parents. They actually have to understand the science of reading. They actually have to sign that they have attended, this, let's call it a classroom endeavor, if you will.
Sure.
And so it's almost monthly that parents are involved in that. And I don't know any better way than for parents to understand the curriculum, help their children be participatory in what's going on in school, go to their board meetings. I encourage parents, go to your school board meetings, run for the school board, understand what is going on with your child's curriculum. It's just key to having parental involvement and parental choice as to where their children are going to be going to school.
Sure. I mean, those are all great ideas. And for a while, it seemed like parents were being frozen out in some of these things.
Well, they were. In fact, in the state of Virginia, at one point, parents were referred to as domestic terrorists because they came to a school board meeting. And I think Governor Youngkin was very clear about his intent of having parental involvement.
I mean, everything starts with education, right? Everything else for the rest of the child's life.
It does. And if you can't read, if you cannot read by the time you finish third grade, I mean, Cade knows this very well, up until third grade, you are learning to read,
Yeah.
And after that, then you are reading to learn. And if you cannot read, you're going to continue to lag behind, and you're just not going to be able to be successful, not only in school, but then when you graduate from school and in your chosen profession, you're just not going to be as successful.
So you're returning the Education to the States tour in Louisiana. What's next?
Well, I go to Arkansas, then Tennessee, and I think I stop by Florida again, and then I'm back in D.C.
Okay.
Till we do our next little run of states that we group together.
All right. How impressed have you been by what you've seen in Louisiana so far?
I've been incredibly impressed with what I've seen in Louisiana. I knew that I was going to be impressed, but it was great coming to two different schools. One was a public school, first thing this morning, and just impressed with the teachers, how they were teaching, just being in the classroom, watching the enthusiasm of the students. That's the third or fourth day back in school, and then coming here to a charter public school, which is a classical learning school, and seeing again and we were in classroom for just a short period of time,
right.
But again, enthusiasm and the teachers and their focus, not being distracted. I mean, a primary teacher in the classroom, and then I don't know what to call the secondary teacher, a paraprofessional who was there also. Yeah. Really, it's the way school ought to be taught.
Pretty nice facilities too, aren't they?
This is a beautiful school. Yeah. And I was asking one of the gentlemen who's responsible for this school, I said, did you build it from the ground up? And he said, yes. And he said, so they had a lot of input, into the school, which is great.
Okay. Let me end this. I know we're just about out of time here. Cade, just give me your reaction and to the Secretary's visit here to Louisiana.
Well, we're excited that she's kicking off a 50-state tour, to return education to the states. And obviously we're thrilled that she chose Louisiana as the number one stop. And so we wanted to make it a good stop for her, an informative stop for her, so that we'll give her some wind behind her sails as she takes this tour on to other states across the country.
All right. Secretary McMahon, other states are going to have to try hard to top Louisiana.
Yes, and I think I'm going to be bragging about Louisiana, too.
We like to hear that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
All right. That's a pleasure.
Thank
I
you
really
very
appreciate it.
All right, Jeff.
Cade, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
So that ends our conversation with Secretary of Education Linda McMahon and the State Superintendent of Education, Cade Brumley. I found it to be very interesting. Now, we did have the privilege of going into the classrooms that the Secretary mentioned before that interview took place. And it was quite an entourage. In addition to herself and Cade, there was United States Senator Bill Cassidy was along, Congresswoman Julia Letlow was in the group, and it was highly unusual, obviously, for these kids to have a group like that in their rooms. But they acted like it was just completely normal. They were pretty engrossed in what the teacher was telling them. They were teaching mostly reading concepts at the time and vocabulary, and the kids were pretty engrossed in what the teachers were telling them, and the messages were getting across. So very interesting to observe. Now, that's going to do it for this episode of the app, Arklatex People and Politics. It's available wherever you get your podcasts, and of course on all KTBS digital platforms as well. Appreciate you watching. Thanks for being here. Have a good one, everybody.